Thank you.
I began to make the point, Mr. Speaker, but in the process, the member from number 6 posed a question as to whether I had responsibility for any of those crimes committed. And I don't need to raise any point of order, in spite of the fact, in spite of his insidious attempt at my personal destruction, trying to impute my character. But one of the things as a journalist in my own right is, as a good journalist, you ought to get as close as humanly possible to the truth, to the facts. And his former deputy leader asked him a question publicly. I have it on record. I will play it on my program tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. He asked him the question about his friend who he apparently borrowed money from, and about his other friend who, when he knew about the deal with houses, he bam, and he bought a house. I understand he had 17 homes or more. And he was told that his friend, dear friend, needed his money. And before they could have this meeting, bam, the friend was shot to death. That is the answer to the question posed by the member from number 6. Shot to death one early morning somewhere in the West. I can deal with the questions, Mr. Speaker. Shot to death he was. But Mr. Speaker, as I said before, when you listen to the members opposite and their presentations, it is quite obvious that they did not come here to this National Assembly to really address the issue before us, the issue of the scourge of crime. They have come here to grandstand. I call it political grandstanding. They don't care about crime. They don't, Mr. Speaker. They only care to get back into office. And that won't happen in this country in a long time. No time. It won't happen, Mr. Speaker. But as I was saying, Mr. Speaker, as a government of the people, for the people, and by the people, we are hell-bent on providing all the necessary assistance to everyone. All the assistance to the people that would help in protecting life and property in this country. We encourage our people, however, to help themselves. You must help themselves. I implore you. And there are many ways to do so. In the area of Frigate Bay, for example, there are neighborhood watch types. There are neighborhood watches, I should say. And this can be spread. These neighborhood watch type programs can be spread throughout the Federation. People are encouraged to invest into their own security. CCTV cameras. We gave the people an opportunity to bring in or to import these CCTV cameras free, absolutely free of our duties, Mr. Speaker. And I trust that many have made the best use of those incentives. And there were other security measures in communities that ought to be looked into. But, Mr. Speaker, I heard the member from number 2 in her presentation, and I was saddened. I was saddened because she carries the surname Liburd. Saddened because, Mr. Speaker, you may not be aware, she is my family. She is my family. And I expect better of her. Imagine, she has come to this parliament and all she could talk about is 50 years ago. 50 years, they said they're celebrating some attempted overthrow in this country. 50 years ago. Man, I had a professor in university who used to say, get up to date, man, get up to date. Get up to date. We're not driving this car going back 50 years ago. Get up to date. But if they want to talk about statistics, Mr. Speaker, we can, because we have access to those statistics, Mr. Speaker. As I said, Mr. Speaker, for 20 long years, under the former Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Llewellyn Douglas, the member from number 6, the member went back 50 years. Well, let's go back to 20 years of his tenureship as the leader, political leader in this country and Minister of National Security. And I don't even want to go back 20 years because we can look at, let's get a little more current then. Let's look at a 10-year span from 2004 to 2013. Just before the motion of no confidence, which he evaded for years and brought this parliament, according to a former Chief Justice, he brought this parliament into a useless instrument. That is his legacy, Mr. Speaker. But get back to crime. From 2004, Mr. Speaker, under the watch of the member from number 6, to 2013, there were 194 murders in this country. 194, Mr. Speaker. And you know, maths is my strongest weak point. So, follow me. And if I'm wrong, correct me. Mr. Speaker, in 2004, under the member from number 6, there were 11 murders. 11 murders, Mr. Speaker. In 2005, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of the member from number 6, there were 8 murders. 8 murders. In 2006, Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of the Prime Minister then, and Minister with responsibility for national security, Dr. the Honorable Llewellyn Denzel Douglas, there were 16 murders in 2007, 23 in 2008, under your leadership in this country, under your prime ministership in this country. In 2007, 16 murders. It jumped to 23 in 2008, beg your pardon. In 2009, the escalation continued. 27 murders. 27 murders under your prime ministership in this country. Did you care about crime? Ask the question. I asked a question and you raise a point of order. But I won't go back there, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, it's clear in the statistics. These are facts. In 2010, 20 murders under the leadership of the Prime Minister then, Llewellyn, or Doctor, or the Right Honorable Dr. Denzel Llewellyn Douglas. 20 murders. And you think that was bad, Mr. Speaker? He then set a record. He set a record, and I pray to Almighty God, we will never go back there. And I know the things, the measures that are being taken by this team, Unity Administration, we will never go back there. 35 murders, Mr. Speaker, in 2011. 35! Did he care about crime? That is the legacy. The leader, political leader of this country, left behind him. That is what we inherited, Mr. Speaker. In 2011, 35 murders. In 2012, 70 murders. And 2013, under the political leadership of the Right Honorable Dr. Llewellyn Denzel Douglas, there were 21 murders. Help me with the maths. All told, for that 10-year period, 195 murders. That's the legacy he left in this country. But if you think that's bad, all told, Mr. Speaker, under his watch as Prime Minister in this country, over 300 murders under his watch, under the watch of the Right Honorable Llewellyn Denzel Douglas, the member from number 6. He liked Llewellyn because he said Llewellyn was the godfather. That's why he's smiling like that. But Mr. Speaker, they talk about statistics. Let's bring statistics. The member from number 7 and leader, political leader in this country and Prime Minister, who I place this comment about whom I place this comment in his house. He will be a better Prime Minister than the one we rejected. He will be. He has already started, Mr. Speaker. He spoke about the period 2010 to 2016. Sorry, 17, Mr. Speaker. And the use of firearms in the the committing of homicides. And when you accumulate the averages over that 9 or 10 year period, the use of firearms in this country was committing homicides. The average is some 85 or 86%, Mr. Speaker. Just this year alone, Mr. Speaker, 23 firearms have been removed from the streets. And we must commend the police. And if he wants to talk about statistics, and he wants to talk about information, we always, on this side of the house, try to get as close to the facts as humanly possible. So I procured some statistics or some financial information, Mr. Speaker, from the relevant department. And believe it or not, Mr. Speaker, in 2001, there was a budget allocation for total recurrent expenditure in the amount of $17.2 million. 2001, Mr. Speaker. Go back a little further, Mr. Speaker. In 1995, when he came into office, there were approximately 2 or 3 homicides. Back in those days, Mr. Speaker, we never hear about these gun crimes. We never heard about these gun crimes until the member from number 6 took the leadership of the political party he now heads. We never heard about gun crimes. Just before, according to his words, these are his words, Mr. Speaker, that he overthrew a 15-year-old regime. He can't deny it. He cannot. He said it. How do people overthrow governments? You remember our ambassador plenipotentiary went missing? What has he done with the Scotland Yard report? I asked him the question, when you get your time on the floor, tell the country, what have you done with the Scotland Yard report that refers to the missing ambassador plenipotentiary and the 5 or 6 others who were on the boat with him that Sunday afternoon? And the pattern continued. The pattern continued, Mr. Speaker, during his entire term in office, moving from 2, or I believe 3 murders, I stand to be corrected, Mr. Speaker, in 1994, to 2015, when he was rejected by the people in this country. There were over 300 murders under his prime ministership. Those are the facts, Mr. Speaker. And even when he left, in 2 months, or just less than 2 months, 1 month and a half, there were 8 murders in this country. That is what we inherited from you. That's what we inherited from you. We inherited the murder capital of the world. That is your legacy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in 1995,
nothing to add.
The truth, but in him, you know.
Nothing to add.
In 1995,
Absolutely nothing.
for the police and fire brigade, there was some $12 million spent. In 2011, Mr. Speaker, recurrent expenditure, $40.9 million. Capital expenditure, $9.3 million, giving a total of $50.3 million, Mr. Speaker. Remember in 2011, no, I said he had 35 murders. But you think he cared? When I said he didn't care about crime, Mr. Speaker, the total expenditure for the Ministry of National Security in 2012 dived, literally dived to $16.8 million. How could he care about crime and fighting crime? Huh? He couldn't care about fighting crime. Huh? Is that took a dive and boozy head? Yes. And he had ball, you know. Mr. Speaker, the pattern continues. In 2013, he took a further dive. These are the facts here from the relevant ministry. He took a further dive, Mr. Speaker, to $12.5 million. You know? And in 2013, beg your pardon, $12.5 million. And 2013, Mr. Speaker, there were 21 murders. And guess what? The murders continued. And in 2015, it jumped to $20 million. And we said, Mr. Speaker, we are going to put the people's money where the people's mouth is. And we increase expenditure in 2016 to $63 million. $63 million, Mr. Speaker.
From 20?
Yes, from $20 million. He didn't care about crime. He didn't care about crime. See the stats here? How much it was? Here. $63 million, Mr. Speaker. $47.6 million in recurrent expenditure. And $15.4 million in capital expenditure, Mr. Speaker. And the trend continues. The trend continues, Mr. Speaker. As you heard from the Minister of National Security and Minister of Finance and Prime Minister, our revered leader and member from number 7. Some people say Harris again. I won't say that here. Prime Minister Harris. I almost want to say family, but I can't do that, Mr. Speaker. I can't do that. That's unparliamentary, right, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, in 2017, Mr. Speaker, $72 million, the largest ever expenditure in this country to fight crime. That's a serious government. That's a government who cares. We're not going back 20 years. We can't go back 20 years. No. $72 million, Mr. Speaker. That is what? For all the 20 years? Well, that's a big one, you know. I'm going to tell you fast. 91. You know, $91 million, you know, in 5 years. That's what you spend. Huh? Are you care about crime? But you're raising point to order. These are facts. These are facts. These are undisputable facts. You can't dispute those facts. You didn't care about crime in this country. You left a legacy of failing to find crime. Failing to fight crime. You remember what you said? Right? You are responsible for crime.
All of them.
police station in your constituency in St. Paul's? Yeah? In the village where you're born and where you live. Imagine that. I mean, you say you live two places, you know. You say you live in East Bastia and St. Paul's.
Live in St. Paul's.
But in your constituency that you represent for 28 years. For 28 years. And look at the legacy you left for St. Paul's. For St. Christopher number 6. No police station in St. Paul's. The poor men had to move out because of the asbestos roof.
The electrical wiring.
The dilapidated building you left in St. Paul's for the police men and women. That's what you left. The same thing in the Bay. The same thing in the Bay. Right now in Old Road. Right now in Old Road, the police are bawling out, they're crying out. Not in the carpet on the floor. You talk about fighting crime? No respect for the police. No respect for the police. You know? Look at Newcastle Station in Nevis. The same thing. You didn't care about crime. You didn't care about policeman and policewoman. That's a thing. Yeah? You remember? You remember the Coast Guard? Is we bring it back. We float the Coast Guard, the Stalwart, and the Ardent on your watch. What beach? For about 15 years, you did nothing. As a matter of fact, you sold the engine for the Ardent. You sold it. And you care about crime? And you talk about porous borders? You can't talk about that. You have no authority to speak on crime. No moral or other authority. You have to speak about crime. You run down the Coast Guard base. When people in the Coast Guard base, ask the lieutenant up there, or the captain, or the major rather. Ask the major. When Coast Guard people went to Easter lunch, things jumping out the roof in the food. That's why you left. We had to now come and do rehabilitation works to the Coast Guard. Brand new headquarters for the Coast Guard. When you come in here talking about crime, you have no authority, moral and otherwise. You have no authority to speak about crime in this country. You have no authority to speak about crime, Mr. Speaker. Right? Look at the Cairn police station. Look at the Cairn police station. As a matter of fact, going Tabernacle, you had the police in a community center for about how many years? 10 years? 10 years. You had the police in a community center for 10 years in Tabernacle. We changed that. We changed that. You care about police? You have no moral authority to talk about crime. No authority to talk about crime. The policeman had a sick out. The policeman had a sick out. You hide the report. You hid the report. Because up now we can't find it. You hid the report, Mr. Speaker. You had to hide it because we can't find it.
I ask that the member will rise every time.
Mr. Speaker, it is so interesting. And I empathize with the member, you know. I empathize with the member.
But there are certain things you will not be allowed to say.
But you see, Mr. Speaker, he's a custom of...
Continue.
I'm continuing, Mr. Speaker. I'm continuing, Mr. Speaker. Because the facts are, Mr. Speaker, as I said to you, I'm a part-time journalist. And over the years I have learned that a good journalist tries to get as close as humanly possible to the facts, to the truth. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, that a consultant was engaged by the government led by the Right Honorable Llewellyn Dr. Douglas, the member from number 6. The government paid huge sums for this consultant to examine the reasons for the sick out of the police force members. They were, Mr. Speaker, they interviewed, Mr. Speaker, those in the high command, those in the ordinary ranks and files. And I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, that report cannot be found. Mr. Speaker, I asked the question, did he remove the report when he came into government headquarters at 4 o'clock that morning? Did he? Answer the question. But you object to the statement about the hidden report, and I rescinded it. But how come you didn't make one comment about the Scotland Yard report?
Mr. Speaker, I can rise on the point of information.
No, you can't raise the point of information.
That the Scotland Yard report was published for the entire world to see. Published. Totally published. He said it was published. Now he said it's tampered with. What does he really mean? He cannot mislead the people of this country or this parliament. You understand? He cannot do that. I am saying again that the Scotland Yard report was published. And he knows it was published.
Okay. What was published? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the point I continue to make,
Man, you're a joker.
is that the member from number 6
You're a joker.
has no authority, moral and or otherwise. He has absolutely no authority to speak on crime.
You have no authority to speak of crime.
You're right.
Dilapidated police stations, a report about the police sick out that can't be found.
Up to yet, never presented.
You know, the Scotland Yard report, Mr. Speaker. Yeah? On rape, you want to talk about rape? Give me the affidavit.
I'll give you
Give me the affidavit.
and delegates.
Let's talk about rape. Let's talk about rape. Let's talk about.
Honourable Member, continue.
So, Mr. Speaker, when I refer to the lack of moral authority of the member from number 6, the member opposite, to speak on crime, he earns, or he has earned, the accolade of the highest number of homicides in this country. Mr. Speaker,
Can you speak to that as well? The incident of rapes.
I could talk about, I could
Speak to it, please, while you're on your feet.
I could talk about the teacher.
Speak to the incidents of rape.
I could talk about that, you know.
Speak to
Mr.
the
Speaker,
incidents of rape.
the point, Mr. Speaker, I'm making, the point, Mr. Speaker, I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that this administration, the Team Unity administration, Mr. Speaker,
Just as a point of call it interjection. The leader from the government did it in my presentation.
He did it, you're right.
I am asking the floor, the chair, to
Consider wasting the
consider
time.
that the member has not asked for extra time. We
Extra
are
time.
now
You're the timekeeper?
in the
You're the timekeeper?
it happened in my presentation. I think it should happen to everybody.
He hasn't utilized his time.
I do have a record of the time, including the time for suspension. I am keeping track of that. Continue, Honourable Member.
We don't finish your song.
Could he address me?
Mr. Speaker, investment, as I said, of $72 million in national security, Mr. Speaker. So, we have a record, albeit as an administration just in its early days, 2 years compared to the 20 years of your mismanagement. But Mr. Speaker, this bill before this honorable House, to wit, the Firearms Amendment Bill, makes sentencing in today's St. Kitts and Nevis more commensurate, more appropriate, Mr. Speaker, with the crime and possession and or use of firearms, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Part 2 of the Parent Bill. Part 2 of the Parent Bill, Mr. Speaker. Did you hide me, Bill? Part 2 speaks to the importation.
According to my timekeeping, your time has expired.
Yes, sir. And I humbly request, sir, another half an hour, 30 minutes. I won't use all, but just to indemnify myself. 30 minutes, sir.
The question is that the member be allowed to speak for an additional 30 minutes maximum, as is allowed under the rules. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. Mr. Speaker, Part 2 of the parent legislation or acts, the Firearms Act Cap 119.05, as revised on December 31, 2009, refers to the importation, exportation, and transshipment. It refers to restriction on importation, exportation, and transshipment of arms. And it reads, and I quote, Mr. Speaker, under Part 2, Section 4, Subsection 1. A person shall not import into, export from, or transship in St. Christopher and Nevis any firearm or ammunition except under and in accordance with the with the terms of a firearm import permit, firearm export permit, or firearm transshipment permit, as the case may be. So, Mr. Speaker, anyone who does not procure, anyone who was not granted, and or for that matter, never applied for a firearm import permit, a firearm export permit, or firearm transshipment permit, Mr. Speaker, contravenes subsection 1, as I just read, and commits an offense and shall be liable to summary conviction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Part 3, Section 9 of the parent legislation I just alluded to, Mr. Speaker, speaks to the manufacture, and the member from number 8 spoke to manufacturing or the non-existence of manufacturing of firearms here in St. Christopher and Nevis. And it speaks to the manufacture, sale, purchase, and repair of firearms and ammunition. Section 9 speaks to the general restrictions upon manufacture and dealing in firearms and ammunition. And it states, and I quote, subsection 1, 9 subsection 1, a person shall not manufacture or deal in firearms or ammunition except under and in accordance with the terms of a firearm manufacturer's license or a firearm dealer's license, or B, any prohibited weapon. Section 9, subsection 2 reads, Mr. Speaker, every person who contravenes subsection 1 commits an offense and shall be liable in the case of an offense in relation to the manufacture of or to dealing in prohibited weapons, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we can go to page or to part 6, Mr. Speaker, of the existing legislation, which will be amended today. And it speaks, or it refers, Mr. Speaker, to the power of search and to obtain information. It speaks or refers, Mr. Speaker, to the power vested in a police officer to obtain information, Mr. Speaker. But listen, I haven't listened to the opposition. This thing about deterrent, and I almost thought he meant detergent. I thought you would say that for a while, deterrent, right? And even the senator opposite, Mr. Speaker, is so hypocritical. Because just recently, Mr. Speaker.
There's a point of order.
Yes, I would like to get some guidance from you as to whether that is a term that is acceptable for use in this parliament and whether the member needs to retract that statement.
Hypocritical? What's wrong with hypocritical? Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is so disingenuous.
Mr. Speaker.
It's so disingenuous. The member opposite is so disingenuous, Mr. Speaker, that just a few weeks ago, about a month ago, Mr. Speaker, he went on the radio station. He went on the radio station and told the world, that the police are planting guns. He went on the radio station and said that. If he has information, Mr. Speaker, of the police planting guns, then give the information to the police.
That's what I did.
Give the information to the police.
That's what I did.
Mr. Speaker, so they have no authority to speak about crime. Mr. Speaker, anyone can glean from the statistics I presented earlier by the mover of the bill and Minister of National Security and Prime Minister and member from number 7. Anyone can glean from the statistics I provided or presented that the use of firearms in committing homicide, a whopping 85%, Mr. Speaker. Almost 9 out of 10 times a homicide is committed, a firearm is used.
Yes.
As I said, 23 removed from the streets this year. And we must commend the high command in the police and the defense force as well, Mr. Speaker. We will commend them, even though you criticize them as the leader of the opposition. So it stands to reason, Mr. Speaker, that the firearm in St. Kitts and Nevis remains the weapon of choice. The perpetrators of violent crimes, the criminals, are using the weapon of choice. And the people of this federation have demanded, continue to demand, and we on this side of this honorable house agree that there appears to be a disparity, an obvious disparity, Mr. Speaker, in the penalties.
That's a winner for number one.
For an offense relating to a prohibited weapon.
That's a winner.
On summary conviction before magistrates and or on conviction before the High Court. You don't even understand the first past the post system. All I wanted was one, you know. You don't understand the first past the post system? I wanted one. Mr. Speaker, the police high command, Mr. Speaker, has called for civil penalties.
Yes.
The people have demanded civil penalties.
Yes.
And we have listened.
We have listened and we have responded.
The people have employed us.
Yes.
They are our employers.
Yes.
We listen to them. We work for them, Mr. Speaker. They have called for stiffer penalties for gun-related offenses. Mr. Speaker, the people of this federation have made similar calls. Mr. Speaker, the facts are before us. As I said, 85% of murders involve the use of guns. So all we are doing in this honorable house at this particular time, Mr. Speaker, is merely reviewing the sentencing guidelines for magistrates. Mr. Speaker, on summary conviction of every person appearing before such a magistrate or on conviction before the High Court, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what this amendment is saying to the criminals, what the amendment is saying to the criminals and holders of unlicensed firearms, member from number 6, beware. That's what this amendment is saying, beware.
That's why we need the support.
We need your support. All the presentations made from the opposite side, I cannot glean up to this moment whether you support the amendment or not. Well, we must call for division.
I will agree on that.
Let's call for division to see where you stand.
We may not sure for the division, but we will agree on that.
Mr. Speaker, possession of unlicensed firearms, Mr. Speaker. The criminals be warned. Such possession may land you in jail for a term not exceeding 15 years on summary conviction or on conviction before a high court to imprisonment with or without hard labor for a term not exceeding 20 years. Mr. Speaker. That's almost a lifetime in jail. Criminals beware. That's what this amendment and that's what this team, Unity Administration, is saying. Mr. Speaker, this exercise today is one that will help us as a government of the people. It will help us as a government for the people. It will help us, Mr. Speaker, as a government by the people. It will help us, all of us, to intensify our campaign to curb gun-related crimes and to re-establish or to establish more effective firearms control. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to conclude as I started and ask a question, Mr. Speaker. I ask a question, Mr. Speaker. Shouldn't we, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Speaker, have the right as citizens of this great country to walk our streets without fear, to walk our streets without being afraid, and to go to bed without bothering that the next sound we hear might be a rapist or a robber, like the one who went into government headquarters 4 o'clock in the morning. That's what I want to end, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask the question in conclusion.
Mention rapist again.
Should we, the people... How much more time have, Mr. Speaker? May I ask?
Mention rapist every time.
10
minutes?
10 more minutes.
10 minutes?
Yeah.
12 minutes.
12 minutes?
12.
I've used it since I asked for it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask the question again. Shouldn't we, the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, have the right as citizens of this great federation to sit in our tenement yards like the young guys who were sitting in the yard in St. Paul's? Shouldn't they have that right, Mr. Speaker? Shouldn't the people of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Speaker, have the right to return home from a hard day's work? Or for that matter, return home from a party without fear, without being afraid to be confronted by a heartless murderer and be shot to death. Again, I spoke to the young man from Taylor's, Sean Smith, just 2 days before he met his untimely demise. Shouldn't he have had a right to return from a hard day's work? It was anticipated that we will meet on the Tuesday. And come Sunday morning, I woke, and young Sean and the young man from Westbourne got burned up, shot to death. May the souls rest in peace. To Jackie, his mother, his sister Sadiq, his stepfather, Mr. Jeffers, and his father, my longtime friend, Malcolm Smith, in North America, I extend I extend profound sympathy on behalf of the executive of the Palm Team Unity group in East Basseterre and my own, Mr. Speaker. Shouldn't the people of St. Kitts and Nevis have the right to return home from a party without being afraid of being shot, like the young lady from Cotton Ground in Nevis? Shouldn't the lady from Church Ground in Nevis, shouldn't she have had the right to return home from a hard day's work, Mr. Speaker, without being afraid and without being confronted by a senseless murderer who shot her to death? And that is the facts, Mr. Speaker. And this, Mr. Speaker, all this amendment is saying that the crime or the punishment for these heinous crimes being committed, the use of a firearm, must be met with the commensurate punishment. Justice must not only be done, but it must be seen to be done. And 15 and 20 years.
Not a long time.
It's not a long time. When you have snuffed out the lives of young people, families will never forget it. They will mourn forever because their loved ones have gone too soon. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I want to fully support this amendment before us, Fireman Amendment Bill 2017, and I commend it to safe passage in this honorable House. Mr. Speaker, may it please you, sir.
Stay up to date with news, programs, and activities of the government with SKNIS. Like us on Facebook. Listen to us on SoundCloud. Follow us on Twitter. And watch our videos on YouTube. Connect with us today. SKNIS, St. Kitts and Nevis Information Service.